Very few things occupy that one special place deeply ingrained in the worst of your nightmares than your first real exposure to that one thing you were way too young, fragile, and susceptible to be accidentally stumbling upon.
For me, it was the discovery that the URL for the cool online educational games I've had set up for me can actually be altered in order to access darker, edgier, and more mature content. Like games where you're George Bush.
But generally, Miniclip, Newgrounds, Nitrome, Arma Games, and the many other sites that hosted Flash games in the early 2000s replaced my parenting when I found them, the highlight being the unsupervised discovery of what was brand new, permanent nightmare material in the form of the first real and most popular game to attempt in-browser horror. Ex Mortis. A game that also, to this day, is the closest you can get to a waking fever dream without drinking third world tap water. And because I hate myself, I thought I'd come back to it now, all these years later, with these unrealistically high expectations to explain exactly how it's held up perfectly.
Famous probably most for its opening scene, because it's the furthest I'd imagine a lot of people managed to get, making it iconic in a way.
It's practically my generation's Mona Lisa, a Mona Lisa for depressed, sleep-deprived millennials.
It hit me hard at the time because it's a single modern-looking house in the woods covered by trees that are at least centuries old.
So even looking at it now just puts me off. I mean, I have no idea what I'm looking at. I mean, I know exactly what I'm looking at. It's the house from the Blair Witch Project, which does ruin it a bit. But I mean, I can't imagine there's many houses in the woods to choose from if that's really what they were super dead set on going with.
Even today, but especially back in 2004, the game's art style and the atmosphere it creates is not only really unique, straight up scary, and uniquely scary, but it completely changed the perception of what world building, immersion, and storytelling was achievable in Flash-made browser games both in 2004 and after. Its exclusive use of photograph composites and deep layered high-fidelity sound effects in its scenes gives the game as realistic a look and feel as is possible without it just being full-motion video footage.
Though because of the small unavoidable reality that it isn't just not real but is in fact a 2D Flash browser game from 2004 means that despite trying its hardest not to look like it, it is just composed entirely of still images. That is so far from a bad thing, though it's aneurysm-inducing. It results in a vibe that's just so slightly off, eliciting a brand new type of tension and fear that I legitimately believe cannot be found anywhere else to this day.
Whether or not it was all a cold, calculated artistic decision or just a poorly aged attempt at hyper-realism for that sake alone, though, is up in the air.
But regardless, I'll give them the credit though, because it's the sole reason I'm still talking about this game today and why I'm making this now.
Likewise, the colour palette alone, which just imagine for a second how well done a colour palette would have to be for it to be even worth pointing out, is sure at first glance just a sepia filter. And it is. So there's that. But it has that practically over every other horror game because it isn't either overly dark or black and white, so it stands out while also radiating how faded and depressing your grandparents' furniture is. And if that's what they were going for, then well done. Also why? Unsurprisingly, it's just a point-and-click adventure game, and a short one at that with a whole 2 puzzles, but getting to them is in between a whole lot of wandering around slamming your face against a wall hoping for anything to happen.
Its issue is it's designed around how it assumes you'd progress, not taking into account that everyone plays games differently. Or that some people might want to spend an hour staring into one room. Some person. Me.
Like, for example, there's a point where you're reading a diary entry, in my case way after I'd already explored the house, nice handwriting by the way, and it's that which triggered the unlocking of a door with no pointer, indicator, sound or instruction, so I could only just conclude that my problem was I hadn't been slamming my skull into the wall hard enough. Still though, and in some messed up way, I feel like that added a lot to the experience. Almost like the difficulty I had in progressing made the game feel rougher, less forgiving, more stressful, and like it had a mind of its own that I was desperately trying to make sense of.
Sure, no one would ever describe those feelings as being anything close to enjoyable, but that's Literally what I just did. The atmosphere helps a lot with mediating that pain though, because if the game wasn't also really scary, those aspects would just be really annoying. Speaking of being annoying though, the game's scares are also really annoying. Without spoiling the plot, because I actually really like it for whatever that means anymore, to the player you realise quickly that the images you're seeing flash constantly accompanied by crisp peaking audio levels and blown speakers are images that, because of how short the game is, you're just about to see anyway, spoiling them completely. I mean, they sampled the house, so why they couldn't have just got the Exorcist girl from Google Images is beyond me. Again, if they were really super dead set on doing that at all. Still though, as I say, and despite that, altogether it's scary, short, fun, and has a pretty good, well thought out storyline that's still worth playing through. I'd love to go on to do the whole reading from Wikipedia thing, but because of the throwaway nature of games from this era, relatively little is known about the development, especially since it's the least popular of the series it went on to spawn. Despite the credits listing a number of different contributions, all of them end up landing you back to Ben Leffler, the mastermind, and you'll hear that from him. He wears it with pride, which is nice to see, because it's more than can be said for the creator of Alone in the Dark. He looks at those games like you've just found his old Minecraft Let's Plays. And honestly, he should, because I'd say, separate from the fact that I love and still enjoy the game, it's just really important as a milestone for video games in such an unrecognised and underappreciated form. And even if you can't see that, then at least in mine and a lot of other people's lives, scarring our young minds and shaping what would go on to be our interests, personalities, but more importantly, our nightmares.
I'll kill you, you son of a bitch.
Apart from that part.